As long as the local recording is good, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, it's back to the what my settings for the local recording that we've been using. So I only changed one setting and I put it back and that fixed it. So my bad. It's a whole bunch of something for nothing. But hey, did you notice how we didn't have any problems that were not created by you or me?
I did.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Did you prepare for it, or did?
I have done nothing that I have done differently the past 2 or 3 recordings.
Okay, I was wondering if
whenever it was that it suddenly seemed to be fine.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Have you been fucking around with the interfaces less?
Yeah, I haven't changed. I was while I was waiting, I was actually scrolling through deals to see if any interfaces had gone on sale, and I don't know. I'm not completely happy with my setup, even though it works fine, and I don't know why. I think it's because I really want to use the other interface that I was using, but I don't want to install like 5 gigs of shit for it to work either.
Right.
So it's
SSD storage is fucking expensive from Apple.
Yeah. I do at least
now
have
I want to know how much
space, though.
Hold on. I want to do some math on that. You keep talking.
I was just going to lead into the whole. I developed a backup strategy and all in the past week or so.
Yes.
And it was driven mostly out of the recognition that, one, I have to go ahead and go into this with a plan, or I'm going to end up with like 12 copies of the same stuff everywhere. And 2, I need to make sure I have a current backup of what I wanted on the Synology and not just the computer and the backblaze. So I actually even went and labeled my hard drives according to their purpose so that I could easily at a glance know what I was going to, put where and to do the different copies. Because I obviously in this, I also updated scripts to make things easier to copy to different places and et cetera, et cetera. So I have 5, sorry. I now have 5 external hard drives of varying sizes ranging from 1 terabyte to 4 terabyte. The 1 terabyte is just archived backups. It's stuff that I'm not going to write anything else to that drive, but it's stuff from different work tenures and education and just stuff that's old that I'm not ready to get rid of because I might use it, but I wanted a copy of it somewhere other than just my computer. So that external drive is not going to be touched in the future. It's the smallest of the ones I have anyway, so whatever. But I set up a hard drive for the show and a hard drive for customer deliverables, and then 1 hard drive for just raw video storage, and 1 hard drive that is the backup of my internal drive. So it matches 4 terabyte internal storage to 4 terabyte external hard drive to keep it in sync. And then all of those get synchronized to my big Synology. And I still have about 8 terabytes of space on that Synology. Plus, as a part of all this, I moved all the stuff off of my small Synology and basically freed it up. There's some stuff on it still from old backups from my significant other, but even that is less than 2 terabytes. So it gives me about 10 terabytes of slower connectivity storage that I can dive into if I need to in addition.
Okay.
And it's a start.
I kind of want to see like a not a flow chart, but like a mind map of it.
I can put that together and send it to you.
I think that would be fun. I'm sure you'd have fun doing that.
I figured it was a good stopgap measure because I'm not going to use that much space before the business could purchase something. And I didn't want to do something that would be permanent storage solution until the business purchases. So, I've been doing some research on what I will purchase when the time comes, and I still don't know what I'm going to do. Because I like the idea of more quick, direct attached storage for the speed of the just sheer volume of files when you're talking about video, raw video. But I don't want to plug in yet another thing and have yet another thing on the desk either. So I'm still torn on which way I'm going to go. But for now, I at least have a working solution with multiple terabytes of free space open to me to not have to feel like I'm having to scrape by.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's fairly important too, because you never want to, I've always followed the best practice of not going over 90% capacity of the drive,
yes.
even for external drives as well. So I guess
I do the same thing.
The only thing that I'd never really managed was like a drive that I use for time machine backups, whether it was the time capsule or a third-party external drive.
Yeah, I guess I should note that I'm not using any software, any proprietary software. I'm just using rsync and shell scripts to manage my backups. But I did implement logging in my scripts so that I could go back and see if there was a problem or anything too.
So I did have, you saw my follow-up for episode 199.
I did?
Yeah, and I don't know how, I was listening to it at the time, and I was like, it's so interesting to me. And this is a little thing. Here's a nice little tangent or rabbit trail or side quest. When I listen to, so I'm a long-time podcast listener. I started listening to podcasts, I think in 2005. Yeah, I started listening to podcasts in 2005 when I got my first iPod, which was the most expensivest iPod Photo. So that would have been a 4th generation iPod. It had a 60 gigabyte hard drive, I think. It's either 40 or 60. And
I think they did 40 for the first release, and then eventually you could get 60. I do not remember for sure because it seems like 20.
That was in my head, and that's why I'm only second guessing whether I had 60 or 40. But that was a really short-lived iPod. Like, it was released in June of 2005 and then discontinued in October. But I guess there was the 4th generation. Well, yeah, there was it was a bump of the 4th generation, and it did come in 60. So now I'm quite confused because there was the original release of the 4th gen was in October of 2004, and it came in 40 and 60, and then they revised it they revised the lower end model. They provided a 30, and then it's a mess. It's a mess because there's a 30 and a 60 option. I don't know. So I'm not even gonna try. But I remember fairly confident that I got the 60 because that was the largest, and I know that I spent it was $100 more to go from 20 to, because there was a 20 gigabyte model as well. I went from 20 to 60. I know I did that, and lo and behold, that was also when they had student pricing. That's why I had a steep discount on that because of student pricing, and then and I remember like 4 months later they came out with the iPod video, and I was like, what? And I remember even seeing like a video of Steve Jobs saying, yeah, we're not going to do a video on an iPod. That makes no sense at all. And so I sold it and got the iPod video with student pricing. Anyway, that was a tangent to a tangent. What were we even talking about?
The
what,
episode 190?
Yeah, 199. So I'm a longtime listener of podcasts, and wow, that was terrible. I think I was listening to podcasts, and it's really easy to sit and listen to podcasts and be like, oh, that's what I would say. Oh, that's what I would say. Oh, if you said it like this, that would be better. It's like, honestly, it's just like I'm editing what I'm listening to in my head, and then I get behind the microphone with you and talk to you, and you get the end result, and then I listen to the final release, and I do the same editing to my own self that I couldn't do while I was recording it.
That's funny.
Yeah, so there is definitely a difference between sitting and listening and critiquing and editing and so forth versus actually doing it. Like, for some reason, can't make myself do it. So, um, that being the case, I was sitting there listening to us talk about um, in episode 199. We're not going to solve this problem tonight about AI, and just some of the lowest hanging fruit was that we never mentioned replicants from Philip K. Dick's. I don't know what the name of his original book was. Do you remember?
I do not.
But it's what the movie Blade Runner was based on.
Yeah, I was trying to think real quick if I had even, because it seems like they flashed the title there at the end as well.
They probably do. It's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna remember.
No,
that.
me either. It's kind of like nobody ever remembers the subtitle to On the Origin of Species, and I still don't remember it, but I always think about it because I, as a freshman year of college, like first semester, history professor says, anybody who can tell me what the subtitle of On the Origin of Species is right now, I will give you an A, and you do not have to come back to class. So he knew that. He knew that. Anyway, the replicants, they were really interesting because they were bioengineered humanoid. So they're not cyborgs. They're obviously not androids or robots. They're not cyborgs either. They're bioengineered humanoids that are physically indistinguishable from adult humans, but they do possess superhuman strength and intelligence. And I think that they don't even know themselves that they are not human, if I'm remembering correctly, because I think there's
Correct.
So spoiler, it's unclear whether or not Harrison Ford's character in the first Blade Runner movie is a replicant or not, and he himself doesn't know. Am I remembering that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So that was I felt like, wow, that's a really interesting, like that's further than like AI and cyborgs and so forth, and it's like like Data was a cyborg that I like to refer to often because he's a full cyborg and he knows he's a cyborg and he has intelligence, but he has for the longest time he has no emotions whatsoever. He's all logic, and so anyway, that could have been interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I didn't think of them either. Because I had just been thinking a couple of weeks ago, I need to go back and rewatch the newest Blade Runner just to, now that it has been a bit and I don't have any, preconceived ideas of what I want to see, just to go back and watch it without initial judgment.
I want to go. I want to go. It's not available anywhere, but I need to double check to see if it's on. I'm assuming that it's on your Plex library or in your Plex library.
Talking about the newest one?
Either of them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. All of them.
The reason I say that is because I've only seen Blade Runner once, and it was probably almost 25 years ago. It's 20 years ago, and I only watched it the one time, and I just remember having specific thoughts about it, but I can't remember what any of those thoughts are. And I want to watch them back to back because I haven't seen the sequel at all.
I have multiple versions, and I don't remember which ones I ripped, but I had the 5 version set.
Yes.
So I need to go double check which ones are in the library, if all of them are in the library.
So yeah, because doesn't Plex support like having like one title show up in the application, but you can pick from the versions?
Yes, if they're named the same. And that's why I need to go back and check and see like what I have where, because I probably just did the director's cut.
See, that's what I would choose, with the exception of Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. I tend to choose the director's cut, or I can't think of a time I didn't choose the director's cut.
Yeah, and I think that's what I put in the library, and I don't know. I will double check because I have the discs somewhere.
I lost your audio for a moment, so I kind of missed some of that.
I was just saying I can't remember which version. I'll have to double check and see because I have the discs handy. I can always fix it.
Yeah, so I think so this might be a movie episode. I was thinking about director's cuts, and like I said, I tend to prefer the director's cut. Um, with the Star Wars movies being exceptions. Because I think because I would call they don't call it a director's cut, but I'm assuming the special edition Star Wars that were released in '97 that removed all that have usurped the theatrical releases. I would consider those director's cuts because they, even though they're not called that, the changes that were made were all George Lucas. He at that point in time he had enough. He had enough ownership of the IP and money that he could do whatever he wanted, and so he made the wrong decision with those releases. He fundamentally changed the story, and that's fine, but he took away the option to acquire the original story. And I think we've talked about this more than once. But see, I now come back and say the thing that he should have done was update the lightsaber fights. When watching The Phantom Menace and seeing Qui-Gon Jinn and a young Obi-Wan Kenobi use the lightsabers the way they did, fighting the Federation droids, fighting Darth Maul. That was so. That's the only good thing about that movie, and I don't know that there's really anything good from any of the following two movies, and he didn't do that. The best, I think, how Darth Vader should have. Darth Vader wasn't properly depicted in a movie until the end of Rogue One. That's Darth Vader, and it's like if you look at that and then like watch Star Wars, it's like there's a huge gap, and that's what he should have put in the movie. That's what he should have fixed. And there's even people that have gone and made they've taken the Obi-Wan Darth Vader lightsaber fight sequence in the Death Star from the first movie and recreated it, and it's in the same vein as. Like it's congruent with how Darth Vader appeared at the end of Rogue One, and that's what he should have done to fix those movies, to make them special edition, not make Greedo shoot first. That's egregious.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of I say I've seen a couple. One sticks in mind where that fight was recreated that looked phenomenal. So I would tend to agree. And I did go back and look. I think I just have the theatrical release, actually, and 2049. So I will look for the discs and at least make sure the final cut version is also added to the library.
I think what solidified it for me when choosing director's cuts, and it's not a hard and fast rule. A couple of franchises. One being the Lord of the Rings. Even though the extended edition is not the director's cut, it's Peter Jackson has said that the theatrical release that's the cut he wanted, and it's just not as much stuff as he wanted. So I guess I'd call it the extended versions are like the longer cut that he wanted. So and I think so it's the combination that franchise, because the extended versions are so good. I really like them, and I think that the only times I've ever seen the theatrical releases of those movies are in the theater. I've only ever watched the extended versions on home video. It's like, why would you? But you know what? They're there if you want them. You don't have to. You don't have to find you don't have to scour the internet for the theatrical release. So there's that. And the other franchise was Alien, the Alien franchise, which all had different directors. And I was familiar enough with the theatrical releases, and then I finally got, a few years after initially watching them, I got I think I bought that set of movies 3 times because. So this is the reverse. I think I copied them on VHS for a while, and then bought the DVD box set, then bought the Blu-ray box set, and then bought the 4K digital. And I watched the theatrical. I had seen the theatrical release a number of times, director's cut, and it honestly made the director's cut of the third movie made the third movie more than it was barely palatable to watch the theatrical release and then watching the director's cut, and I was like, oh, I understand why you made these decisions. It made it a movie that I enjoyed.
I think the only one that it's not a hard and fast rule. I tend to make sure I have whatever initial release was done available. And then it depends a lot on the movie, what other versions I do. For example, Lord of the Rings, of course, I have the extended versions. And I think that's the only one that I have in the library as opposed to the theatrical release.
I never bought the theatrical release.
I did buy them. I do own them. That's just not what I watched, so I don't remember digitizing the theatrical releases once the extended releases were available. But I have multiple copies of those movies, both extended and non-extended, so that's no surprise. But the Justice League, the theatrical release, and then the Zack Snyder cut, I tend to look at the Zack Snyder cut as the more definitive version of that
Which
film.
movie?
The Justice League.
Oh, okay.
And it's one of the few times where what was released didn't quite feel right to me, but then what was redone and re-released later felt more like what it should have been. And it's kind of rare. Most of the time, I tend to prefer the original release, not necessarily strongly over re-releases, but at least going back, I tend to look at the original. The major exception to that has been Lord of the Rings, where the extended versions are, for all intents and purposes, the definitive versions for me.
Okay.
Which is kind of funny, because as I think about it...
opposite of me.
Yeah. And I have nothing against... So, to the original point, I have nothing against any creator releasing a different version of something they've created. No qualms with that whatsoever. I will watch as many different versions of what you want to release as you want.
I'm in the same boat as you.
The problem I have is the Lucas problem, where he decided to then make it impossible to get the other versions. That, to me, is just horrifically abysmal. It's like a creator's sin, almost. If you created it and released it, it should be available to me to see again.
Yes, I know you and I feel this way, and I like what John Siracusa has said about it, because he's also ranted on this exact set of movies, and that was, it's like, they no longer belong to you, George Lucas. Yes, you created them. You are and you can, just like you said, you can put out there as many as you want, but once you have released something, i.e. the theatrical release, it now belongs to all of us, and we should have access to it, reasonable access to it. So,
I always looked at Disney and their vault back in the day as kind of the perfect example of what you could do, because they didn't take it away. You just couldn't buy it anymore.
They created scarcity where there wouldn't be otherwise.
Right. And so you could still see it when it was, broadcast, or if somebody else had a copy or whatever, and they would every so often
from the video store.
Yeah. And then they would re-release it every so often, in batches. And to me, that's fine. If you want to, like, you could use that model to do something like what Lucas did if you wanted to, where, okay, X number have been released. Those exist. That's it. We're going to re-release with some edits in 25 years. I would be okay with that too. I don't like the scarcity creation as a byproduct, but I get it, right? Like that to me is not...
It's marketing.
And it's not trying to erase the previous version, which what he tried to do was erase all traces of the previous version.
Right, because like I think the previous versions, the theatrical releases, only exist on VHS and Laserdisc.
Correct. They were never released on DVD, and there was talk that they might finally get released when Disney purchased the rights, and obviously that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I remember hearing rumors of that maybe 10 years ago, but nope. I expect upon his passing, or maybe if Disney, because like there's no way Disney didn't do a deal where they could eventually release it because they know how much money they can make on that.
So I've heard a couple of different rumors talking about the source material being damaged enough that it couldn't be re-released.
It's a bullshit.
Well, I tend to agree, primarily because we've seen community members address those concerns by making do with other pieces, right?
Not just community members, but community members that is they are the top of their field in doing that. That is their that is their livelihood, not just their livelihood, but at the they are the ones that you would seek to do that. And with how much money the original movie made in 1977, I just absolutely cannot accept that is a true statement. It is
realistically, the key is just which generation is still around. Because you know full well that if he passes and Disney decides to do it while our generation and maybe the generation prior to us are still available, that's a gold mine of money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But if timing doesn't work until later generations are available, you're going to miss out. Like there's so much nostalgia and childhood memory like aspect to a certain group that's what's going to drive your sales, and if you miss that window, it's just gone.
That's true. Speaking of, I saw a 1 minute, I think it was Lego, a 1 minute recap of the first 6 movies. So starting with The Phantom Menace, ending with Return of the Jedi. And it was a 1 minute telling of it with Lego, and it had 0 references to Jar Jar Binks. And I was like, this is probably the best version I've ever seen.
It's funny. I actually don't hate Jar Jar like many people do. I don't like him, but I was fine with him.
I mean, I don't hate him either, but he shouldn't have been in the movie.
I can concede that point, but the thing that just gets under my skin is the whole Greedo rewrite. That's just
that's the worst. That's the worst. That is by far the worst thing that has happened. And anytime I see a kid that has something related to Star Wars, I've done this. I once saw a 4-year-old kid in the elevator. I think he had a Chewbacca shirt on, and I looked at him and I said, "Greedo shot first," and walked out of the elevator. Kid's not even going to remember that, but the parents will. I don't know if it's like one of those things. I have no idea if they understand the reference or not, but it would have been better if I'd said, "Hey kid, Greedo shot first," because that was "Hey kid" or "kid" was a term that Solo used
all the time.
Once.
Yeah.
So that's how I would. I felt like there was one other thing that yes, in the speaking about Jar Jar, it made me also. I also didn't like the pod race. I didn't think that was really. It felt like filler, and it could have been. I don't know. I didn't care for it, but I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it.
I get that, but I also enjoyed it to an extent because it was a distraction from
Jar Jar.
Well, just from how serious he tried to make other aspects of the movie.
Yeah,
and the original trilogy was not overly serious. I mean, it dealt with serious themes, sure, but other than Empire, it wasn't it didn't try to be a drama. Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. And it felt like with the prequels, at least at the onset, prior to getting to the pod races, it felt like it was trying to be more of a drama than it needed to be. So I think I welcomed it because it was just a fun side quest. Interestingly, though, in what was the name of the Last Jedi? No, so
I
it
know
would have
they're all misnamed.
I know we've
The
yeah,
Rise of
Rise of
Skywalker is
Skywalker.
9.
Yeah, which one was the one where they went to the gambling planet? That was 9, right?
I only watched those movies once each, and I probably won't watch them again.
Either way, the aside there, while that felt like it was supposed to be a similar type thing as the pod racing, that felt very much like filler to me, and I didn't like it.
I agree. Um,
We're gonna go find the master cracker on this planet, and that's the only place. Yeah, whatever.
right. So, yeah, I didn't care for that either. But I was already not caring for the movie, as it was. So, yeah, I don't. Yeah, actually the second that one movie was the last Jedi.
What I don't think it was in. It was in the other one though, wasn't it? With the Codebreaker, or was it in the Last Jedi?
I don't know. The Last Jedi was the eighth movie.
It was the Rian Johnson one.
Yeah, that's the Last Jedi. That's
right.
the eighth one.
Right. What I'm saying is I can't remember if that storyline was in the 8th one or the 9th one.
Oh. Yeah, I don't either.
Because
I
remember the main thing that I disliked about The Last Jedi was they didn't do enough to sell me on Luke being the way he was.
You mean finding the origin of the blue milk wasn't good enough for you?
No, it wasn't.
That was so stupid.
Just from a character story place, we knew Luke as a whiny little bitch in Star Wars, and then we saw him become a different person over the course of those 3 movies, to the point that he would stand on principle. Character. Yeah, he'd stand on principle, and he tried to turn his father back to the good side. And then you get to the newer trilogy, and he's going to kill his nephew because of some sense of the dark side, and then exile himself. Like, it didn't connect. And they didn't spend enough time trying to sell me on these things occurred to take him to this point, which is why those movies felt stupid. And as a result, because I couldn't buy into where we were from the character development standpoint. Now, if they had spent 10 minutes setting it up and trying to tell me how we got there, I'm in. Like, I really did like the idea of having this arc that took Luke to a really dark place. We just never saw anything about it, and then you want to put it on the screen and say, oh, this happened. That's not how you fucking do storytelling.
Nope. But you know what? That it leads them for it made left holes so they could make more movies.
So I think they fell victim to having this wealth of expanded universe content prior to the Disney takeover that fans generally accepted generally accepted certain storylines as more or less canon on what would happen, even though it was never official. And then Disney bought the rights and said, okay, everything you know that has not been actually published is fiction. And we're fine with it. You can continue to do it, but that doesn't mean it's the story that exists in our universe. And I think they fell victim to trying to please aspects of those stories and try to do something semi-original, and it just all fell flat.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And
of course, I talk like I'm a master storyteller. Like I can't tell a story worth
but
shit
you can be
either.
a critic.
But yeah, absolutely.
Just because I don't.
I am working on my storytelling abilities. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I was actually wanted to get into or talk about or mention was that, and these are not my original thoughts. These are definitely thoughts that were put into my head. I agree with them. I wish I'd come up with them, but they were put into my head by external sources. But Shoot, the words are not coming to me. Oh yes. So I talked about my dislike for Jar Jar Binks. I sat in the theater just disliking him so much. I dislike the pod race, just because it just. I feel like you could have gotten a side quest. Same thing with like was it the gambling, the casino or something?
Yeah, it was. They had to go
I didn't.
find this master code breaker thing, and it
Yeah,
was on a casino
I
or in a
didn't like
casino.
that either. That was really silly. And if you wanted to have like a side quest, you can't, or you don't. Well, a side quest it just takes away from the story. A side quest like that is not needed. It's like the episodes of the TV shows that are just like you aren't doing this. Um, we're starting to see TV, and I'll come remind me to come back to TV shows because I think we're starting to see the right things happening there. Um, but the it doesn't add to the story. It's not helpful. And if you want people to stay interested because maybe the story material is a bit, dark, that's why you have characters that provide comic relief. Like Han Solo was hilarious throughout Empire Strikes Back. I mean, calling Leia your worship and somebody says something obvious to him and he'd be like, yeah, that's a great idea or whatever, like he already knew, like, because he already knew what they, so, I think that's how you get around it. And, it just, I wonder, it makes me, so a couple things. It makes me wonder if George Lucas just really hates like The Empire Strikes Back because he couldn't do that stuff in there. There were people that were balancing, were providing sensibility to the silly things that he might have wanted to do. But then he had a little more control, and he was able to do the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. Because even though I don't dislike the Ewoks as much as I dislike Jar Jar Binks, they make no fucking sense. Like, how are these little teddy bears with sticks and stones and I mean, quite honestly, they're practically twigs with a rock tied to it as arrows, attacking the worst army ever known in the universe. The stormtroopers that can't hit anything, even though they are the worst army in the universe, they're not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, so I follow and I agree, but at the same time, I loved the Ewoks. But I think it's because I was young
Yep.
and it appealed to me as a kid, and I really loved Wicket above all the others for no reason other than he was a named Ewok.
Right.
Um, and I think that's part of why I don't hate Jar Jar as much as a lot of people, because it's not for me. Jar Jar is for the kids in the audience at that time. And it makes sense, and I'm okay with that split. But I think it's because, especially over time, I've been able to look at movies, thanks to Pixar predominantly,
I was
as
about to reference them.
as you have a certain element that's for part of the audience and a certain element that's for another part and a certain element that's for another part. And I can appreciate those complexities enough to give them their due, so to speak. So, like for Return of the Jedi with the Ewoks, fine. At the time I was a kid. I loved the Ewoks.
Me too. I
I
love the Ewok movies.
I don't really care for them as much now, so I get the point, but I don't have a problem with it because of that recognition. It's almost like thinking of Easter eggs for different groups of people, but it's not fan service in this case like The Force Awakens was, where it was basically just let's rehash A New Hope with the new cast and then move forward kind of thing.
But see, The Force Awakens to me was the best one of the last three.
It was like, and it's because of that fan service, but it's still, it was just a fan service movie. It's J.J. Abrams and Disney knew what they needed to do because the prequels soured the opinion of a lot of people on the universe in general, and The Force Awakens rode that nostalgia wave as hard as it possibly could to basically make a couple of generations of people be their bitch.
Yeah, and that's not good storytelling.
It's not, but it was still a great film.
It was good money making, I suppose.
It was a needed breath of we understand what makes Star Wars from
But then they pissed it all away.
right. And that's I think that's part of why the most recent trilogy just didn't feel good. And it's part of why a lot of the Star Wars TV series have felt better.
Yeah, so I'm like it's at a point where like Star Wars is, I am more interested in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies than I am Star Wars. Like I just
Oh, for sure.
because they actually they told a story. There's new stuff happening. It is also they took original characters that people loved, created an entirely brand new story, and then explained it by splitting the timeline in a clever way. And I thought that was great. And it didn't require little bears or potentially racist aliens. Because I feel like Jar Jar Binks is kind of racist.
Or a Tribbles episode.
Tribbles.
The little furry balls from the original Star Trek.
Yeah, I know about the Tribbles. I don't think I ever saw it, but yeah, I just it's it's really disappointing that they took something that started out really well and just sort of really squandered it. And as far as they're concerned, they're making a shit ton of money, and that's probably what matters. But as artists or whoever's feels like they whoever values artistic integrity, probably not happy about it. So,
well, I think it's interesting that from a movie perspective, they have not done well. But if you take what they've done with The Mandalorian and the Ahsoka TV series and the Obi-Wan series, the new Acolyte series, all of their series content has been drastically better than their film content in recent years. And I don't know if it's just because of the difference in format that creators are willing to tell more story to advance the development in a way that is needed to make sense, or if it's because the films were too much like a fan service kind of spectacle. They're too much trying to recreate the feelings of the original trilogy instead of expounding upon the story. Because even if you take like Rogue One and the Han Solo movie and kind of think about the differences in the way those have been presented, they still felt better than the quote-unquote mainline saga stories from a film perspective.
agreed.
And the only explanation that I can come up with is that the Skywalker saga, quote-unquote, didn't know where it needed to go and was trying not to damage the brand instead of, let's finish a story that is fun and entertaining and makes sense. Because like going back to Obi-Wan, the TV series, for example, we know how that ends. It's not like you can take and completely change the trajectory of who Obi-Wan was or what happened within what you have established as canon. But you have a massive timeline that you can pull from to tell other stories about this character to fill in things that we don't know. And it did a good job of doing that. At least it felt like it did a good job of doing that.
I have not seen it, so I cannot comment. But I did see the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, and I felt, those were it made watching something related to Star Wars fun again.
Yeah, I was not quite as happy with the 3rd season, but it wasn't bad.
The Ahsoka series looks pretty good as well. I didn't hear anything. I don't think I've heard anything good about the Boba Fett series.
I enjoyed it to an extent, but I enjoyed it as a companion to The Mandalorian and not as its own series. So I would say out of all of them, that's been the biggest letdown. But I don't think it really was a letdown if you paid attention to what they were trying to tell you, which is that Boba Fett reached a certain point where he was no longer young and spry and was looking at what the next chapter and evolution of his life would be. And that's not the story that people wanted to see.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it's like with what they did do a good job. But the episodes that were a crossover with The Mandalorian were the best episodes.
I think that my biggest critique of The Mandalorian, and this is based on those first 2 seasons, which were, from what you're saying and what I've heard, is probably arguably the better, better than the 3rd season, is that there were too many filler episodes. There were too many. This episode, you watch the episodes over, and it's like that didn't do anything for the story. And I think that's okay once in a while, but there were too many of them. And so I think that you can truly see art. You can truly see the artist do what the artist should be doing. And it's not always that artists should be allowed to do what they want to do, because that's how you end up with the prequels. That's how you end up with Jar Jar Binks in a pod race in the Phantom Menace. And even if you like him, it didn't belong there, in my opinion. But the level at which I have, or I think something that has been exemplary, is the 4th season of Stranger Things. It's an odd number of episodes. I think it's 9 episodes in the season, and the runtime on the episodes appears to be determined for how they want to tell the story in that episode. So I think, the first 3 seasons, you're seeing the 45-minute mark, and I think in the 3rd season they were able to get a little bit looser with that, and they were able to get, they might have some episodes that were an hour, but when you get to the 4th season, you have the first several episodes with the runtime that you expect, and then you have several episodes that are like an hour and a half long, and it's like, whoa, that's a full-length movie. And then you get to the final episode, and it's 2 hours, and it's just like they're like, this is how much we need, that we're going to take this story, we're going to break it up into the episodes on how you tell a story in a TV show. And guess what? This episode is actually going to be 2 hours long, because that's how much time we need. And we can't break it up into 2 parts, because that's just not good storytelling. And to me, I see that as an indication of the producers trusting the creators to tell the story right, and people will truly enjoy that story because they have trust in the creators. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.
Yeah. So I just think it's whoever came up with this is so clever. Whereas like the Phantom Menace, the first episode should have been The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, that makes sense, right?
Oh, yes.
And then the second episode, or the second movie that they called it Attack of the Clones, that should have been Revenge of the Sith. Also makes sense. The third movie, which they called the third movie. They called
Revenge.
They called that one. Yeah, they called that Revenge of the Sith. That should have been Attack of the Clones, because that's what actually happened in the movie.
Right.
And then the fourth movie, Star Wars or A New Hope, should have been called Return of the Jedi, because Obi-Wan had been gone for a while, and he comes back, and he tries to do what Jedis do and have a Padawan, and yeah, that just makes sense. And then the Empire Strikes Back should have been called The Force Awakens. That makes a lot of sense because it's Yoda.
Well, I
He
mean,
comes in.
Luke.
Yeah.
Luke
Yep.
finally did something
Mhm.
more than just stop blasters from the training droid thing.
Right. Right. And he actually becomes a Jedi. That would have been a great because Yoda has been in solitude for however many years. I don't know. I don't know how time passes there in that universe, but that would have been a great name. And then the the sixth movie, Return of the Jedi, should have been called The Last Jedi because all of the Jedis are dead except for Luke. Darth Vader dies. Sorry, spoilers. Obi-Wan is already dead, and Yoda dies. He's the last Jedi. That would have been a great title. And then the seventh movie that they called The Force Awakens should have been called The Empire Strikes Back because that's what happens. That's a great title for that movie. The next movie should have been...
Except that they weren't called the Empire.
Oh, they weren't?
No, that's they.
That's
that
right.
Was
That's right.
Oh shit! What did they call them?
It's close.
Yeah, I mean it's
I
a
mean,
rebranded Empire. That's all it is.
Right. It's not the it's the Empire, but not in name.
Fallen Order, is that right? No,
I don't remember.
Fallen Order was the game, the PS5 game. Never mind.
Oh. And then the eighth movie was called The Last Jedi, and that should have been A New Hope. That fits. Luke is back on. He's back. He's training. Doesn't he train? What's her name?
Yeah, Daisy Ridley's character, Rey. Yep.
Rey. And then the last movie would have been The Phantom Menace because the Emperor, who we thought was dead, is somehow back, but like as a ghost,
and should have still been dead. Like that was such a horrific. Yeah, whatever.
Anyway, somebody clever renamed the movies with the existing names. So